Hi, I'm Rajnish.
And I'm Brigid,
Welcome to Terascience.
the podcast where reality matters. So today we had a really great conversation with our guest Molly Beauregard about consciousness-centered education and meditation and mindfulness. So stay tuned.
It was a great conversation. We discussed about how mindfulness and self-awareness can change students' outcomes in a great way when they start to detach from problems and think about more global awareness and work towards bigger outcomes. Today we have a very special guest, Molly Beauregard. I met her at the Science of Consciousness conference uh, earlier. I think it was May, April or May, and we started talking about consciousness and the importance of mindfulness early in younger students. And it's wonderful to have Molly here. She's an author and she's a sociology professor at the College for Creative Studies in Detroit. And so, Molly, would love to know more about yourself and how you started doing what you're doing.
Well, first of all, I have to thank both of you for including me on your new podcast. I'm thrilled to be here from Detroit. It's exciting, it's fun, and it's lovely to see you again, Rajnish. Last time we were sitting, I believe, at a bar. I'd like to say we were doing something super intellectual, but we were chatting away while other people were talking about important topics. So that's fun. This is a friendly re-encounter. So thank you for including me. So let's see, where do I start? I am a professor of sociology at the College for Creative Studies in Detroit, which is an art and design school, similar to, you're both in California, I believe. So like Art Center Pasadena would be a benchmarking school. And I taught sociology for probably, 10, 12 years. I taught intro to soc and cultural semiotics and a variety of different courses. And honestly, for 7 or 8 years, it all seemed to go very well. I'd come in, I'd talk about sociology, and my students would be super interested in what I was doing, and I would give them exams, and they would write me nice essays back, and things went really well. And I don't know, I think probably 2008, 2009, I started going to class, and nobody was interested in sociology. Nobody was interested in what I thought they should be interested in. I'd come in, and they'd all be, tapping away on their phone or playing on their computer. Specifically, I remember one time I was in the middle of this lecture and everyone was tapping furiously away. I went to the back of the room with this grand flourish of, they think I'm so smart. And I turned back around and it was just a sea of screens. Everybody was on Tetris at that time. And I thought, wow, like what's going on here? What's happening here? Why can't I get anybody to connect with this knowledge that I think is really interesting? And so at first, of course, despite the fact that my training's in sociology, and there's never a pattern of one, I thought, gee, I'm a lousy teacher. Nobody likes me. This isn't going well. Maybe I should get into a different kind of business. And then at the end of a semester, I went to a meeting of our Student Success Center. And at that meeting, I started to hear about statistics and how college kids were doing on other campuses, which was not very well. And while that made me feel very sad, it also made me feel very validated because I found out that I was not alone in my experience of teaching to a very disconnected audience. And so I started to think, well, what can I do? How can I reinvent what I'm doing and make this more interesting to a group of kids who, frankly, are coming to school with very different experiences in life than I did, when I went to college. And I started to think about my own experiences in life and what had grounded me and helped me to feel really good, and that was meditation. So I got this great idea. I'm going to put meditation in the core curriculum of my class. And remember, this is 2008. It's before meditation was the buzzword for everything cool. It was basically the buzzword for everything that was weird. And I start running around and knocking on doors and saying, I got an idea. And that went over really well. But I continued teaching. I continued doing what I was doing. And I had a semester where I had a course, I think I had 22 kids in the class. And I had 4 over the course of that semester told me that they had made serious attempts at on their lives. And this just broke open my mama heart and really turned my idea into a mission. I became incredibly passionate about what I was doing. I started to do a much deeper dive into the research. I started to get much more serious about the kind of curriculum I might develop. And I became very inspired by some other people who were doing work in contemplative studies in higher ed around the country. Some people using mindfulness, some people using Vipassana, some people looking at indigenous contemplative practices. And my practice is a Vedic practice, which is a mantra-based practice. And so I developed a course where we asked this question, who am I? Who am I? And we ask that question through the sociological literature of identity studies. And then we have professionally trained meditation teachers come into the course, teach my students how to meditate. And we have this reflective component in the class. And I've now developed this whole platform of consciousness-centered education, which is essentially bringing objective, subjective, and transcendence into the classroom over the course of a semester in one class. And that's what my book is about.
Great.
Training the student mind. So that was a long answer. I didn't tell you anything about myself. I told you about my project.
No, that was amazing.
That was amazing. Yes, that's very important. And
I'm excited to read your book also.
Yes, and I have lots of related questions too. But maybe we should give you a chance to tell us about yourself pretty quickly as well before we move on.
So tell me about yourself. So I went to the University of Michigan to undergrad. I'm from the Detroit area. I'm from Birmingham, Michigan, which is just north of Detroit. I later did a master's in public administration. I thought I wanted to be someone who worked in policy development, and thank heavens I didn't do that, because I don't think anybody wants to be in politics these days. And so then I went on and I was doing work in sociology. I was doing my doctorate. I was working towards a doctorate in sociology at Loyola University. I have 3 children, 2 daughters and a son. And when my son was born, I always tell the end of this story. I tell this story in the book. He was very, very sick. He is now well. So the end of the story comes first. My son is 6'4". He was a college athlete. He's a beautiful, great kid. But his sickness and taking care of him as a baby forced me to drop out of a doctoral program and pushed me down to my knees on the floor with him, doing sesame oil rubs and trying my hardest to stay in the mystery of an undiagnosed problem. And it really changed my sensibilities about who I am as a teacher and as a mother. And it taught me a lot about love and the healing power of love. And it's a huge part of my story. So that's who I am. So I've been teaching, for about 22 years at College for Creative Studies. And I'm a mom. I'm probably a mom first. And I am also the co-director of the program in consciousness and creativity at the University of Michigan.
So is that the time when you connected more with the Vedic methods, or were you already sort of interested in that before?
So I learned to meditate in my mid-20s because my mother made me. I had zero interest in it, and which is the best way to learn. I learned transcendental meditation. And I practiced with some regularity, mostly as a nap while my little girls slept. But yes, it was during that time when my son was sick that meditation practice, which had been sort of kind of interesting, became very much the grounding force of my being, because it was what kept me anchored to the wholeness. Mm-hmm. And helped me to see that I didn't know what was going to happen with this child of mine. And I had to stay in that space of not knowing, which is challenging for a parent. And feel safe in that space of not knowing. And the meditation profoundly impacted my ability to do that.
Yeah. Wow. I really feel like I wish I had heard about your work and your class before, because I'm recently introduced to it through Raj, and I was able to watch your documentary of the class, the Tuning the Student Mind one, which was fantastic.
Well, thank you.
But it's just really I think important how your motivations behind introducing things like meditation and mindfulness into the curriculum is really based in the reality of, different things like the disassociation of students in classes and, just trying to find yourself and, cope with different hardships like you've experienced as a mom as well. Because that's really what I've also experienced. I'm a recent graduate out of grad school, and so I am still fresh out of school.
Congratulations.
Thank you. But I've seen so many people, and I've experienced so much, turmoil sometimes. And there's people that I know who've suffered a lot from different, depression and suicidal thoughts and things like that. And I found for myself some sort of a mindfulness to, just through reading books and listening to different podcasts and stuff about probably a little over a year ago. That really helped. That really kind of changed my outlook on everything. And I'm able to cope with life a little bit more productively even. So then I came and, my last year of grad school, I started doing my thesis, and my thesis is literally on how do we figure out, what the current perceptions are of students of meditation and mindfulness, and, how can we use that data to somehow bring it into the curriculum, right? And I'm amazed that that's exactly what you're doing.
Oh my God. So this is all about you and I. You can go This is all about Brigid and I. 3 cheers for you. 3 cheers for you. We will talk.
Yeah.
After this.
Well, you can talk now as well. Yeah. So no, this is
so funny.
That's why when Brigid mentioned what she was doing, I think this is a really good fit. So what I was thinking is, I think we should really explore, what Brigid and you have to say in this. But before we get into that, so the two things that I would like to bring in here. One is, what do you think are the causes for our educational system to get in this sort of pit where students are not happy? What is going wrong there? First, if we discuss that briefly, maybe the disconnections and all these things, depression. Why did 4 out of 20 students come up to you and say that? So what causes that maybe, and then you and Brigid can just provide all the what.
Get excited.
We get excited. We get 3 cheers. We can have a dance party. I'm it's all stuck in my throat. I've got a whole bunch of things I want to say.
Yeah.
The first thing I want to say is something that I often say when I'm speaking to college audiences, and when I'm speaking to faculty. We've got to get the horse in front of the cart again. We are consistently asking what's wrong with the student rather than what's wrong with the educational system today.
Yeah.
And I think you are hitting on that with your question, which is, to me, really one of the most important questions that we can answer right now is how can we re-engage people in learning? How can we really re-engage people in learning? And it's such a long conversation. I have a lot of thoughts on it, but I would start by saying that higher ed has really become vocational training.
Yeah.
And that doesn't matter if you're at Harvard or you're at a community college or Stanford or anywhere in between.
Even research has become vocational because the incentives are very self-focused. So,
everything.
Yeah.
That's right. Everything is self-focused.
Yeah.
And everything is about what are you going to do next?
Right.
How much money, when you read the statistics of the people graduating in higher ed who simply want to go into financial analysis of some kind or financial services. And not that that's not important, and not that jobs, we need to work, we need to make money, we need to keep the economy moving, but these things aren't mutually exclusive. They work together, and we learn most of us, how to do a job by doing the job.
Right.
But we need to learn how to think. We need to learn how to connect. We need to learn how to be compassionate with ourselves and with others. And we need to learn about meaning. And if there's no meaning left in the process of school, no curiosity, we're creating curriculums for students that are very much like the drumbeat, just do, get your ticket to enter the carnival that is work, and now you work. So I think that that's a huge problem.
I was also going to say just the distractions in the world, I feel like, have increased, where, the access to everything online, you're not necessarily always learning online. Sometimes people are learning a lot online, but there's just so much going on. And, it's really hard to be present and really hard to focus because of that,
I was also thinking the same thing.
Right. Just like there's other things that you could be doing.
Yeah. But what I was thinking, like what you and Molly just said, I was thinking both of you are saying in a way that in our systems, image and self fulfillment in terms of physical things has become very important, and the systems have become very competitive. So we have integrated in our teaching systems that one has to compete and have this wonderful image, and that has become so important that we also only listen to people whose images we like. It doesn't matter what the content is. Content has become less important, image has become more important, and that leads to what Molly was saying, then there is no meaning. We have lost the meaning.
There's a lot of disconnect, and there's a lot of impulsivity in education. There's a lot of impatience in education. I was in a critique, this was a couple years ago. I actually have a little vignette about this in my book, with a group of interior design students, and they had been asked to design a health center. And so they came in, and they were darling and delightful, and many of them gave good presentations. They had, the wallpaper on the walls, the tile that would go on the floor, all of these beautiful materials that they would do. And I was there with a colleague of mine, and we began to ask them questions about who did this health service serve? Where was this health service located? This is an imaginary student project. And they stumbled. They really couldn't answer these questions. And they got very frustrated with the questions. They became very defensive about these questions. And we ended up having a very interesting conversation about what are we doing wrong? Because if we're not teaching students how to read the world, right? Then how can they design for the world? And it created a decent amount of change within that department about the way projects were really being organized and constructed for students to do, so that we didn't just get back these real pretty pictures, Instagram worthy, but that we have students who are being thoughtful about who's going to walk through this space, how people might feel in this space, what kind of clientele, what kind of community, all of these issues that are equally important. But there's always this constant, to your point, Rajnish, this race to the finish, this competitive energy, this desire to do everything by myself. I do all by self.
Yep.
And it's a movement away from the collaborative energy, which creativity always happens in collaborative spaces. And so I think it's that. I think there's the bombardment of noise. I think there's the bombardment of visual energy. We lie babies in cribs, and we have a baby Einstein mobile that goes around over their head, right? And it's got images. And then we put them in a chair in first grade, and we say, sit still. We're going to tell you about the Revolutionary War. I mean, I'm bored by that. Why don't we understand that an 8-year-old's bored by that? They've been lying in a crib watching movies, since they were a few days old. So we have people, coming into higher ed that have a completely different skill set than people like you and I do, and a completely different way of learning and navigating the world. And what that comes with is often a lot of sensitivity, which we then define as anxiety. I sometimes question how much of this anxiety is actually mental health related, or maybe it's simply a different way of being in the world. It's an awareness of the stresses and the strains and the troubles of navigating this noise. And it's a sensitivity born of our immersion in the cultural context.
Because there has been no training in how to deal with all the information that's coming in, and that just bottles up into anxiety. It's like,
And then we define it, we give our students labels, mental health labels. And this is part of where I was going to go with Brigid, with some of your comments earlier, because I think and I just had a conversation about this earlier this week with a former student. All of our meditation sort of platforms are set up, meditate to eradicate stress.
Mhm.
Okay, sure, we live in a stressful world. That's the gateway to get people in. But I would like to hear more people talking about human potential. I would like to have more people understanding that knowing how your brain works is a human right. Is a human right.
It should be one of the amendments. No, I'm just joking.
Yeah. So,
And
we need.
everyone's brain works differently. I think that's where you're going. So learning your own potential and knowing
Mm,
what your
yeah.
capabilities are, right?
That's right. That's right. And feeling the essence of who you are.
Right.
What I teach mostly in my class is set up to ask this question, who am I? But it's essentially an identity studies course. And I always start my course. I mean, identity studies, we know now is we've done a very good job, right? Divvying up all of the diverse and beautiful different identities that we can express in the world. And I think that that's been a wonderful journey that we've done over the last 40 years. And we need to celebrate those identities. But we also need to understand the commonality of our human experience.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And we need to understand that we have an infinite identity, which is connected to the absolute, the whole consciousness, call it what you want. And we have a finite identity.
Right.
And the finite identity is the here and now identity. And it's the only way we can recognize that you're not me.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And you're not me.
Mhm.
But we are expressions of each other. And what a gift that is. What a gift it is that we don't have the responsibility to be each other all the time, that we can be uniquely, organically, and authentically ourselves, and yet also have the deep, deep awareness that at the root level, we are connected to the wholeness.
Mm-hmm.
Which is very beautifully said, and I think that's in a nutshell, that's the problem, that we're always wanting to be someone else, not understanding and knowing who we are ourselves. So I think I'm satisfied with the problem, and I would love to hear both of you talk about the solutions and learn and listen and learn. So
I'm curious, how do you define like consciousness
yeah,
in your view, Molly?
Well, we were just at the Science of Consciousness conference where there are lots and lots of people who say you can't define consciousness, right? Because every time it's a hard problem of science. And so every time we try to define consciousness, we are binding, because definitions by their very nature are binding. And consciousness is the all that is
Gotcha.
the intangible, the absolute, the beyond the beyond. The meditation that I use in my class is Primordial Sound meditation, which is Deepak Chopra's mantra-based meditation that comes from the Vedic tradition. And I am now a certified Primordial Sound teacher. So I now teach my students Primordial Sound along with another teacher. I've also taught students TM in the class. We've had TM teachers come in as well. So the idea behind a mantra-based meditation, which I'm sure you're both familiar, is that we're using a mantra, which is a sound with no meaning, and we effortlessly repeat that mantra in our mind, and the mind naturally and organically falls into the silence of the self. So we've all had that experience of transcendence. I mean, everybody's had that experience in their life. You're walking in the woods with someone you love, and the sun is coming through the trees, and you have a moment where you forget about yourself. You forget about yourself. You feel connected to all that is. You're sort of that ultimate silence, the coherence that creates the world bubbles up. But when you use a mantra-based meditation, you're training the mind to essentially touch that space. Every time you touch the space, then it's quiet, it's the gap, and then you think, oh, I'm not thinking. Now I'm thinking. Oh, I'm right. It's beyond the thinking. So you pick the mantra back up and you continue to meditate. Over time, more and more and more of that silence comes into the experience of the everyday life. And so to me, consciousness is the lived experience. We are enlivening the consciousness that is the undercurrent of all that is through our living, breathing, beating hearts and bodies and minds. We're enlivening.
I would agree with you on that. So I presented another idea of consciousness at the conference, which is very much in line with also how what Deepak Chopra also says. And I think you're right. I also feel consciousness is an experience of experiencing the world through perceptions and interactions with the environment and I call it information that is
Yeah.
surrounding us. So yeah, I agree. And it's how we interpret
Yeah.
it, how we interpret the world in our mind is sort of consciousness.
I think it's important how you said like the silence part, because it's the actual just experiencing things and not thinking or having a narrative going on in your head that kind of pulls you out of the actual experience. I think that's kind of, at least in my own experience, of more of a presence type of a silence in my mind and actually just enjoying something, that blissful moment. As you're talking about it, that's kind of what I could see also as that just actual consciousness being, rather than thinking about being.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Well, we intellectualize a lot. I mean,
Yeah.
Rajnish and I at this conference, everybody's intellectualizing a lot, which is always out of the
Yeah.
experience of consciousness. And to your point about presence, we all want to be there. We all want to be there, and we all know that feeling viscerally. We had that experience. I have a friend, a meditation teacher, who says, the mind desires to go there, and so the example that he uses is if we're talking to each other, we're enjoying each other's experience, having this conversation, and Brigid, your favorite song comes on the radio, and you didn't even hear that the radio was on in the background, but all of a sudden it's your favorite song. Your mind will naturally go to that song.
Right.
It will go externally to that song. The same is true when we meditate and we use a mantra. The mind will naturally fall off that mantra and go to the most charming aspect of self, which is the self, the silence, the underpinning of experience. What kind of meditation do you do, and what kind of meditation did you study for your master's thesis?
That's an interesting question, because I really didn't get into different types of meditation. I focus more on mindfulness, and I've tried meditating many times, and it's really hard. Like there's been yoga classes that I've done, or tried at different times. My mom's been a yoga teacher, so I used to do a lot of her classes, and she'd put everybody, into a meditation kind of at the end. And I always fought it, like, for a long time. Before I kind of understood it these recent years, but I used to think in my head when somebody be talking some sort of a mantra or meditation, I would hear myself in my head be, nah, no, that's not, no, you don't have to listen to that. And it was just like fighting it in my head. But it's kind of I think I'm working more and more towards getting there regularly with the mindfulness, because it's like a step of just being more, aware and thinking just about how I'm feeling or what I'm sensing, rather than, I don't know what type of meditation that's kind of leaning towards, but that direction is where I kind of have been heading over time. But I have tried some mantra ones as well, and I do enjoy it. But it's a challenge for me somehow to get into it. But I see the benefit and I feel it whenever I do get there as well, and that's kind of why I wanted to bring it into the schools.
Yeah, I think you speak very eloquently to the frustration that I think many people feel who are trying on their own to meditate. And that's part of why I've written the book on consciousness-centered education, because I think one of the things that we have to do is we have to validate institutionally why meditation should be in the schools. And in order to do that, we need to have people who are trained meditation teachers teach people how to meditate. Because meditation should be an effortless experience. There shouldn't be any working at it. But it's subtle. It's a very subtle process. And if you're taught by somebody who's been trained how to teach you to meditate, you will effortlessly fall into this experience. I've never had a student who's failed the meditation course. That just doesn't happen. Doesn't mean that they don't come out of meditation and think to themselves, oh, that wasn't a good one. But, they're all meditating. And part of the meditation experience is releasing that stress. So when we tell ourselves or we tell other people, oh, I'm working really hard to get rid of the thoughts, then we're just fighting with the mind. You can't get, if your brain's working, your brain's going to think. That's what your brain does. And you seem like a very bright young woman. So your brain thinks, and it thinks all the time. It thinks incessantly. And you're going to go from idea to idea to idea. And so this notion that that's not the correct use of your mind is also crazy. That's, that's what brains do. But when we introduce mantra, which is this vehicle of the mind, then the mind just naturally and organically transcends that thinking mind. There's no effort. It's beyond thinking. It's silent. Boom, to the bottom of the ocean.
It's sort of like a training method, like what Bridget is saying. I think a lot of times people have misunderstood that, what you're also saying, Molly, that in meditation you have to stop thinking. You can't stop thinking. Just like your heart, your brain is going to be functioning, but in order to train it to slow down and look inwards rather than outwards, that's what the mantra can maybe help there.
The mantra can help there, and then also just the practice of coming back to it, of sitting, and the practice. It's it's like getting on the treadmill and walking for 20 minutes and saying, "Damn, I didn't lose 10 pounds." You've gotta keep going back to it.
And with the mantra meditation, so I grew up going to a Buddhist temple. That's where my mom would always teach yoga, and so I was around a lot of the Buddhist monks there. And they were amazing, and we'd like watch some of their I think it's pretty much mantra meditation that they would do, sometimes with some instruments or something, but it was a lot of chanting and really long, like just together moments that when I was younger I didn't really understand. But in my head, when I think of mantra meditation, I always kind of connect it with the Buddhism. And I think when one of the challenges when you're trying to bring something like meditation into the curriculum is, trying to not push it as like a religion, right? And I'm kind of curious, how have you gotten any backlash for that, or how do you approach that
That's
to
a
bring
good
it
question.
in?
Yes.
That's a great question. That's a great question. So I did a meditation program, and the Primordial Sound meditation and TM are both from the Vedic tradition, which is more connected to Hinduism than Buddhism. So I just want to clarify that first off. Okay. But I think you're right. There's lots of chanting in Buddhism, and we could have this. We could do 4 hours. We could do a year on different meditation types. But many meditations are connected to religion, and mindfulness has been secularized and developed, in the West through a medical doctor, John Kabat-Zinn. So that is more agreeable to many institutions. Gotcha. And, and that's complicated, right? Because then we're taking practices that have existed within religious traditions or indigenous traditions, and we're taking them out of context. And we're not always pointing back to where they came. And so it gets tricky. It gets complicated. So even when we're telling ourselves we're not doing something with any religious connotation, we're just not talking about the religious connotation. We're just not talking about it. Gotcha. And my favorite definition of spirituality is the articulated essence of the human condition at any given time. That's Henryk Slocomowski's definition. He was an eco-philosopher. So it's not about what gods we praise or how piously we do it. It's about the human lived experience. And I think if we start to think about meditation as a spiritual practice, we can get a lot farther. Now, I'm not teaching in a public school, so that's A. Right. I'm not teaching a required course. That's B. Gotcha. I'm teaching young people who are between the ages of 18 and 24-ish, and they're choosing to take this class of their own free will. It's one class out of 120 credit hours that you need to get a BA from this school. So it's a valid experience. That said, there were a lot of people who pushed back on it. And it was not an easy course to get approved by the faculty. It went before the entire faculty assembly. It was an enormous fight. There were a lot of fireworks. Wow. It was not an easy thing to do. So you are you're hitting on a tender spot. I'm still slightly bruised.
Right. That's kind of because while I was trying to research, other ways that it could, be brought in, some of the studies that I was finding is that, people have a perception that it's just too connected with religion, so they don't want to bring it to schools in that case. And that's kind of like that big challenge that I've faced, at least in my own research.
So in my class, I do tell my students at right up front, I say, this is what we're going to do. We're going to learn this Vedic practice. I tell them where this comes from and a little bit of history on it.
Mm-hmm.
And then I say, and if you don't want to do this, you don't have to.
Right.
But this is an opportunity to learn a meditation practice, and it's not connected to any, it's connected traditionally to these religions, but it's a practice that we're taking and we're going to use it in this way. And then I have occasionally a student who comes from a Christian tradition. I've had students who've come from Muslim traditions who say, I'm not sure I want to do that. And I say, that's fine. You don't need to learn, and you can sit with us. You can pray, or you can, through your own, use your own religious practice to pray, or you can sit in silence with us. And that's fine. So I don't have a big pushback from my students. It was more from faculty.
Right.
Well, also, I think it sounds like the ultimate goal of your practice is to self-realization and silence and meditation. And again, the different religions have done this, like you were saying, and there are all these colors of it. But stripping all of that away, the practice is the same. And especially with the Vedic or Hindu side, compared to other religions, I think that there is less of a idol sort of worship baggage, but I don't know, that may or may not help. But in the end, it's about self. It's like internalizing thoughts and thinking, and so it's great, and I'm really happy that you're doing it between with 18 to 24, 25-year-olds, because if they start to learn doing this early on, it's really going to have an impact in their lives, and hopefully they can see that. So, I mean, to tell us about some of the success stories. So, how is it going?
So one quick comment just in response to the first comment about religion. One of the things that I got such a kick out of at the Science of Consciousness that we were at together in Arizona was how many scientists start with a poem, a quote from William Blake. I'm going to read you something from Rumi, and then they literally, they sort of take it and they're like, yeah, so that's, now I'm going to talk to you about the brain.
Yes.
I'm like, wait, we live together in this world. You're going to point to this inspiration and then tell me it's shit, and then go back to this materialist mode of understanding the world. That's not to say that there isn't value.
Oh, of course.
But there's great value in that science.
Absolutely.
But it's a different angle dive into the same pool of knowing. And we're all trying to tell each other stories about how the world works. And that's what this is. It's all stories about how the world works.
Completely agree with you. And unfortunately, like you were saying, the pushback is because even though there is value in all of these different packages and tremendous value, but they've all been labeled. And because of those labels, when you try to do something such wonderful as what you're trying to do, those labels will emerge first. I don't want to do this. I don't want to do this. And nobody will look at the values. So in a way, you have to kind of push back on the labels first to get the value behind it. We shouldn't have to do that. But unfortunately, that's how it is.
No, that's how it is. No, I agree with you. My success stories are, I've done some what I call quality control research, which has basically been surveys of my students. So I have some anecdotal evidence from my own students, as well as lots and lots of stories and feedback, qualitative. So the quality data that I have is that my students leave my class feeling more connected to each other and feeling more peaceful, feeling less stressed about their schoolwork, having an easier time getting things done. They report feeling better and enjoying their schoolwork more. They report feeling more connected to each other, feeling more peaceful. Some of them do report feeling closer to their religion, but not any specific religion, to their religion that they were raised in. They report feeling less anxiety and less stressed. So that's all really great, data. But I think even more interesting than that, or more important, many of my students kind of changed the direction of what it is that they think they want to do out in the world.
Mm-hmm.
So I often tell the story. I have a wonderful student who actually won the JFK Award for young humanitarian people, developed maybe 8 years ago an organization where she went out into the city and she started to talk to people about, I want to make coats for the homeless. And when she started to actually listen to people, she found out that they didn't want coats, they wanted jobs. And she has something in Detroit that's called the Empowerment Plan, where she trains women and men now, I think, started as women, to make these sleeping bag coats, and they sell them all over the world. So that's sort of
That's great.
an amazing story, right? Of connection and being able to listen more to what the needs are rather than push what you think people need.
Right.
I had a student who actually last week, he's a painter, who was on his painting was on the cover of the New York Times. He's did a mural of, Vincent Chin, I believe is his name, who was an Asian American who was murdered in very tragically, obviously, in the 80s, I believe. I don't have the exact stats, but Tony is a Chinese American who wanted to celebrate the 40th anniversary of his death and has created and resurrected an entire movement in the city of Detroit around celebrating Asian American communities. I have a student who's now a colleague. He went on to get a master's in ceramics. His name's Henry, and he is a potter. And he and his wife, who is also a student, opened a community ceramics school. And he talks about making a cup as community, as bringing people together in the process of making and the art of making and what making means and the metaphor of the cup. He's a brilliant teacher and a wonderful artist. And of course, the documentary film, which you watched, Brigid, was directed and edited by my student, Chelsea Jackson, who became really passionate about consciousness-centered education, wanted to do a documentary film about that. It's a great story. It's a long story. Went out to do other people's courses, other people's work, and said, I can't find it, and so came back and followed 3 students in their transformational journeys in my class. And she's now gone on. She's one of the film editors on a film called The Holly, which is about a community activist in Denver.
Great.
So, I can go on and on and on.
That's what I was leading towards, because you're touching people's lives, and so based on this conversation, what I'm gathering is you're really changing the dial for them, because the problems that we discussed are occurring because of the disconnect between who these students are, and so when they're disturbed about that, they can't focus outwards and just worry about what's going to happen to them. But with meditation and with your practice, they are now more connected with themselves and a little bit disconnected with the problems. So they can put the problems aside and more connected with themselves, and now they can look outwards and do all these wonderful things. This is really the power of meditation, and it's good to bring it to the students.
And not just that. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No.
It's not just that, but it's also super important to have good teachers like you. And I think, being a student so recently, I've had some teachers that I loved, and they inspired me, and they really, made me motivated. And I've had other teachers that you tell they're not as engaged themselves, and it really makes a difference. And I had a small experience being a teacher myself, teaching like public speaking for part of my TAing, and I loved the students. Like it was such like a highlight of my day to talk to them, and even just try to explain some of my own thoughts, because I shared my thesis with them, and I got their, some of them took my surveys and things like that. But it's just super, interesting how I would get some comments at the end of the class, and they'd be like, thank you so much for caring. And like, that's really made an impact this semester. And I think that's like kind of also what you're doing in this as well.
You said something really beautiful and really perfect, which is I loved my students.
Right.
And, love sometimes can become a dirty word or it can become a trite word. But the truth of the matter is, if you love yourself, you really can extend that love to other people. And so 9/10 of what any good teacher does is care about their students and allow their students to feel that care in the classroom. They go out in the world and they learn how to do the jobs they need to do. They don't remember what you've taught them in the class, the specifics.
Yeah.
They remember the feeling. They remember what's emanated in the class, and you can encourage them to become curious, and you can encourage them to become curious about specific ideas that they can then take and run with. And I think, Rajnish, what you touched on your comment previously too, is it's the meditation. And that's absolutely the core of consciousness-centered education. It's creating this foundational platform where we're relieving our stress, where we're inviting the transcendence in the room. But it's also this curriculum. And it's the curriculum that has been developed that is asking students the questions that are helping them to peel back the layers of self. So I use a lot of metaphors, and I say, we're peeling back the layers of the artichoke to get to the heart, or we're cleaning out the garage. What do you do? What do you do when you clean out your garage? And you take everything out. That's right. You have to take everything out of the garage and look at it in the light of day, and then you take the hose and you do this, and then you decide what you want to put back in. And in order to create meaningful systemic change, that's what we have to do as a culture. And that's what we are doing. That's what these hot, political, scary times are. We don't need to be cynical about this. We need to look at this as the act of cleaning out the garage. We are taking everything out, and we are deciding what we really value and what we really want to put back into the garage of democracy. What do we really value? What are we going to look at in the sun? How are we going to unlearn these bad habits that we've learned over the last 200 and some years? And how are we going to move forward from this time that's different? This time that's different. How has the contextual environment shifted that we now need to shift our ideas about how we live together? And we can do that.
Yeah.
And so I think my biggest frustration and my biggest joy is that I have so many students come in with so much cynicism, so much hurt in their hearts, and so much reporting like, I'm broken, I'm anxious, I'm stressed. And then I have so much joy at how easy it is. This is not hard to do, to get them to open their eyes to see, no, this is a correct experience for living in a world that's cleaning the garage, and it's confusing and it's scary, and I'm peeling back the layers, and everybody's peeling back the layers, and it's okay. I can move through this and trust in this process and trust in the flow of my own spirit, that I'm here for a reason, and I can work with other people and connect with other people. And that's really, to me, the power of consciousness-centered education. It's moving into, and connecting, empirical knowledge, subjective experience, transcendent knowing, and the relatedness between those things, inviting that into the classroom. And that's where the ideas are.
Yeah, and going back to what Bridget was saying, I think it really reflects the caring nature that you have as a teacher, because only that this is why you took all these steps to create these programs and allow the students to self-realize. And also, to the second point, it is so important for each individual to peel out those layers, because then collectively maybe we have better hearts working
That's right.
together, right? But each individual has to work on it themselves as well, and everybody's, and it's for their own betterment too. So,
and also
it's hard. It's hard. Young people really want to change other people. They're like, oh, down with the man. They want everybody else to, but you gotta work on yourself first. Yeah.
And something you said previously that I think is important to highlight, kind of that labeling of I am anxious or I'm depressed or I'm stressed, is kind of also something that I feel passionate against, these like negative labeling or titles or I am this. It's a belief, right? And it also comes with things like diagnoses and, just the way that mental health is treated. And that's kind of where my grip on the meditation and mindfulness comes in, because I feel sometimes we're a bit quick to diagnose things as, even just like anxiety.
Yeah, because
when it could,
we have treatments.
Right. I mean, and they're very profitable.
Exactly.
Right. Exactly. And that being said, in my own research, just trying to do stuff for the thesis, I'm not against those types of, therapies or medications. It's just when it's so quick to, oh, you're anxious, here's some pills, type of a reaction that doesn't come along with any type of life skills or coping skills or anything
very
else.
Tricky, Bridget. It's very tricky. And you're right. It's a very tricky landscape to enter. I am the daughter of a PhD in psychology and the mother of a counselor. And I am a strong supporter of getting help and seeking help when you need help. And I am also, there are times when people need pharmaceuticals. There are many, many, many variables. This is not a one size fits all for everyone. But to your point, I think one of the other things that's happened in the meditation landscape is then what we do is we also say, oh, I don't want to have these belief systems that I'm bad. But, we can't just throw a wet blanket on negativity and try to shift to positive ideas. It just doesn't, because all we're doing is pushing down the negativity. And then it becomes this false positivity, which is also not.
It's like, just don't be sad. No, it doesn't work like that.
No, it doesn't work that way. And it's back to, you can't stop your brain from thinking because you've got a brain that works. So we have to walk in this mud, and we have to walk in this mud together. And that is challenging, and it isn't always fun, but we can do it. And we can acknowledge that we live in a country and in a world that uses a therapeutic language, and we're always looking at our deficits. And we can also acknowledge that we are whole and that we are internally free. We have to find ways to reimagine the world that we live in. And I think that when we reimagine the world that we live in, we're going to be able to very easily find solutions. They're all there. Yep. They're all there. But we have to find ways to use all this knowledge that we've collected over all of these years, all this great research in science and treating depression and treating anxiety. And we need to use it with a sharper knife. We need to stop spitballing. And we need to allow young people to be a little sad and wade through that sadness with the confidence that they'll come through it, and know that the only thing any of us can count on is change.
Right.
No matter how good you feel right now, this is going to change. And no matter how bad you feel, it's going to change.
Right.
So it's when we sort of transcend those feelings and we're grounded and anchored in the self that we can kind of wave to them, be like, oh, today's a sad day, but I'm not going to get attached to it.
Yeah, because the normal is actually this. It's not always your normal.
That's
isn't
right.
a happy day.
Actually, if it was, it won't be much fun.
Right.
It wouldn't be much. You have to have the contrast. It's a world of contrast. We live in a world of binary opposition. We know happy by knowing sad.
Yeah.
So we have to kind of navigate and swirl in these spaces. And it is challenging, but it is also okay.
Yeah.
No, it's great. But would you like to add something else? This has been a really wonderful conversation and a very important work that you're doing. And hopefully it can go beyond Detroit. Are there any plans to bring the program to other states, other institutions?
Well, I think Brigid is going to, as soon as she starts to teach,
she
will be sending me an email, and I will be sending her a syllabi and giving her everything she needs to do this in her own way. She doesn't have to do it the way I do it, but do it in the way you want to do it. And
I'll
I think
definitely be asking you some questions for my thesis stuff, but
I would be honored to speak with you again. And all I would really like to say is just thank you for the opportunity to speak with you, because I am a big believer that words echo. I've been at this for a long time, and I've done library lectures where 2 people show up, and I've done keynotes where there's lots of people in the audience, and I'm always happy just figuring that the right people show up and the right people will hear it. So thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak to your audience.
Thank you so
Well,
much,
thank you for
Molly.
joining us. Yeah.
Thank you guys for listening so much to the Terra Science podcast. And thank you, Molly Beauregard, for being a great guest today. It's been a really fantastic conversation. And I feel like we've all learned a lot about this topic. So thank you again, and we'll see you in the next one.
Thank you so much.
You've been watching Terra Science, the podcast where reality matters.
We discuss food, planet, consciousness, the issues that we face, and the solutions that can be offered. And we discuss with wonderful guests who are leading the way in finding these solutions.
Don't forget to like and subscribe and hit that notification bell.